bringing you news and updates from the Alliance of American Football, your source for everything Memphis, with your hosts, Dan and Michelle. This is Memphis AAF. Welcome to the podcast all about Alliance Memphis, where we bring you the latest news and updates, and then we kind of point out the fact that we still need a name. I am Daniel, accompanied by Michelle. How you doing?
I'm tired. How are you doing?
Why are you tired?
I don't know. I work too much.
Well, that's true.
But that's not what we're here to talk about today.
We just got a little bit of news, and then we are bringing in an incredible interview. That was a lot of fun to record.
Yeah, we interviewed Nathan
Shackleford.
Yep. Who's an agent representing football players. Is it only football players?
I think so. That's kind of his focus.
So anyway, we interviewed him, and I actually got to be part of this interview, which was really fun. It was fun to learn more about what an agent does, and he had some insight into some things that I hadn't thought about, but you guys will hear more about that in the interview when we get to it.
Yeah. All right, so just a little bit of news, not a whole lot of big news or anything.
Shocker.
But the Alliance shop is back up.
The shop?
Yes, where you can buy merch and gear and whatnot. All the fun stuffs.
Oh, that shop.
Yeah. What shop are you thinking of?
I don't know. We hadn't ever referred to a shop, so I didn't know what shop.
The Alliance has a shop, shop.aaf.com. You can get like all the team-specific gear now. It went down after the Eastern Division was announced. The shop might have been overwhelmed by traffic.
Here's hoping. That would be so cool. People are so excited that they're just like clamoring for that merch.
Yeah, but it came back up Monday, and it's up now. So go get your merch, support your teams, support the Alliance.
Be like Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, yeah.
So the shop is open and up and ready to go. What else is going on?
So the Alliance has announced that it has signed over 500 players.
That seems like a lot. Like a lot.
I feel like it is a lot.
How many players are signed in the preseason?
So each team gets 75, which brings that the total number of players signed is going to be a max of 600.
Oh, wow.
So we're almost there.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And as you'll hear in the interview, like at this point, there's not a whole lot going on. There's no more tryouts. I mean, they're probably just going to, sign the last few for training camp and for the off season.
And I'll bet that teams already have those last spots filled in their minds. Maybe not like contracts signed, obviously, but they pretty much know where they're going. Yeah,
and we got to any last few spots. I mean, 'cause I think I saw like Memphis and a couple teams were like up to 60 something. So there's only like 8 or 9 left. And then a few teams, I think San Antonio just signed 30. So they're picking up the pace. But we got the QB camp coming up and then the QB draft. And apparently, so Memphis has 5 QBs signed and then other teams have 3. I think one has 2. So the way it's going to work is they get to reserve 1. So I'm assuming we're going to reserve Bacon, Met, and Cheeseburger.
Right, because the QBs were drafted to the league and not...
They're assigned to the league.
Right, I'm sorry. But they haven't been drafted to teams yet.
Correct. So they're outside the allocation process.
Right. They have jobs. They just don't know where yet.
Yeah. For now.
Yeah.
Because obviously they're going to be cut because a team's not going to carry 5 QBs. So each team will get to reserve 1 and
Sorry. I'm so sorry. So this is totally off topic, but can we call the backup quarterback Bacon, Met, and Cheeseburger Jr.?
Junior Bacon, Met, and Cheeseburger?
Yeah, whichever one. But we'll call him the Junior.
There you go. I can dig it.
Like Whopper Jr., but...
I think they'll appreciate that even more than Zach being called Met and Cheeseburger or Bacon, Met, and Cheeseburger.
Yeah, I'm sure the second tier quarterback would love to not even be known by his own name. He's just a junior of the first string. Okay, sorry. Back to what you're saying.
So each team will reserve 1 quarterback. For us, probably Zach. And then the rest of the quarterbacks go into the draft. And then each team can draft based on what they need and what they want to carry through the offseason.
Now, something that you've mentioned a couple times now is quarterback camp. What's that?
It's just like the combine, but for quarterbacks. They'll go through quarterback drills and evaluate the quarterbacks that are going to be in the draft.
Okay, so that will happen before the draft takes place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they'll use like what they see during this QB camp to determine like who they want to draft.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
See, again, that would be something that'd be cool to go and watch and observe and like interview people for. So I don't know. I wish we could go to that.
Yeah. Hey, so AAF, we know you're listening. Get us some media passes to the QB camp.
That'd be so cool. Although I'm sure the quarterbacks would hate us walking around just giving them dumb nicknames.
Yeah. All right, so shall we get into the interview?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, everyone. We are here with Nathan Shackleford. He is an agent that represents some of the players that are in the AAF. He had a really interesting history. We were talking with him for a little bit and just hearing kind of how he got started with football and actually becoming an agent. So, Nathan, man, how you been doing? What are you up to lately?
Good. Nothing much, really. It's kind of a slow time right now because a lot of teams. I've actually talked to two or three teams that are actually like almost completely full. So the CFL is winding down, and so it's kind of a slow time right now since I'm not doing the NFL, just kind of doing AF, CFL. It's a little bit slow right now, actually.
Gotcha.
But that's good for the AAF, though.
Yeah, but it's what the tough thing is we can talk about this later too, is that I have a bunch of guys that are allocated, and so the guys that are allocated, they're on these teams that don't want them, and these teams are filling up, and so I can't talk to other teams about them. So it's kind of but we can talk about that later, how that whole thing works.
Well, I know that I'm personally excited to have you on the show because as a football fan, I know some about the sport, but not really about the business of football. So I'm excited to learn more about what an agent actually does.
Yeah. It's I mean, you see it on TV and on movies and all that, but you don't really, took me a little bit even to figure out what an agent truly did,
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you do as an agent?
Okay, yeah. So I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and growing up, always playing sports. Played football in high school. Wasn't able to play in college just because I tore my ACL my junior and senior year. But always stayed around football. And then when I got out of A&M, I went to SMU law school and started doing that. And then kind of when I got there, when I got to SMU, was just looking into all the options to kind of stay around sports, and football really was the main priority for me. And so as I was looking around, just heard about an agent and tried to look into kind of what that did. And so I reached out to every agent in Dallas, and only one football agent got back with me, and his name's Gary Glick. And he's kind of like my mentor, the guy that I really look up to, the guy that kind of got me my start. So went with him to some pro days. I was there with him during the draft, got to make calls to teams and kind of see the whole process. And so that kind of what got me into it. Yeah, there's so many different paths to becoming an agent, but mine is I knew I wanted to go there. And so that's kind of how my path got me to where I am now. So an agent is in a business, in our business law class, everything that applies there applies here. So an agent is an agent relationship is there's a principal and an agent. And so the principal here is the player, the agent here is the actual agent. And so the principal or the player is giving the agent the authority to negotiate for him, to represent his best interests. So what I do is I talk to teams trying to, depending on the level, it all depends. What I do really depends on the level of the player. So if you have a guy, for example, I represent Tommy Armstrong, and Tommy is a really well-known guy, played at Nebraska, huge name. So when I call teams and drop the name Tommy Armstrong, they know who he is. He's a known commodity. So then it's just talking about finding the right fit for him, finding the best interests for him, doing all that. Whereas I represent a lot of smaller guys, like, you guys have talked to Christian Love and Bubba Jenkins, and those two guys are not known commodities. So they're kind of a little under the radar guys whose names aren't quite as big. So my job for those guys is to get their name big, to get their name where every team I talk to knows their name, where everyone knows they're available, where everyone's seen their film. And then from there, it's just following up with teams, making sure that seeing if there's any interest, seeing if when there's injuries, if they want to bring them up, just staying in good relationship and connection with the teams. It's very, very relationship based.
Sounds like it. Yeah, and it seems to be kind of like one of those jobs where it's more about who you know and building, like you said, relationships and networks to kind of get that inside, contact where other people can't.
Yeah, that takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially the hard thing at the beginning of the AAF was when the AAF first started, it was all these NFL people, and a lot of NFL agents had connections with these old former NFL people, but I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
So it took me, a long time to get numbers, and then even after you get numbers, They won't answer numbers they don't recognize. So it takes a lot of time to kind of develop to the place where they recognize your number, they'll answer the phone, know you by name, that kind of deal. So that takes time, definitely.
So like you see a lot of players like Richard Sherman comes to mind. They don't have an agent. They're representing themselves, negotiating their own contracts. It seems becoming more and more common. So why do players need an agent?
Yeah. So, I mean, the plus side of if you're the player and you're going around not having an agent, you're saving that 3% or whatever the agreed upon percentage is. Generally, industry standard is 3%. So, you're cutting out that 3%, which could save you, over the term of, your playing career. If you're a guy like Richard Sherman, that's saving you millions of dollars, most likely. And so that's an incentive. But at the same time, the point of an agent for these bigger guys is to negotiate contracts to be able to leverage, what the player's done and what they're going to be able to do. And that takes a lot of research and in-depth look at contract structure. And generally players aren't going to have the time to spend to look at all that. So that's kind of the higher up players. And plus also with those higher up players, if you're in a heated negotiation and you're the one negotiating the contract, that might create bad blood between you and the person you're negotiating with, which might make it, strain a relationship going forward. Whereas the agent can kind of, take himself out of it a little bit from as a third party. So those are for the bigger players. For the smaller players need agents to have someone who can get their name out, who can make them a known commodity, who can get them a chance. Because smaller guys, if you're reaching out to all these GMs, doing all this on your own, there's a lot of teams. There's some teams who do a really good job of looking at your film no matter what, but there's a lot of people that if you don't have an agent, you're a player sending out your film, teams won't even look at it. They're just going to discard it. So by being with an agent as a smaller guy, you're kind of saying, you kind of get the brand of that guy saying, hey, I've dealt with this agent before. So the fact that this player's with him means he must be a reputable, decent guy. So that'll at least get your film looked at by being with an agent. So it kind of depends again, based on, are you a big, well-known commodity or are you a smaller guy? But I think in either case, there's a big pitch that you need an agent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It shows that you are somebody that people are willing to work with, that they believe in you.
It's like a personal salesman.
Yeah.
Yes. For the small guys, I mean, I feel like I'm in a sales role a lot of the time. I have to know my guys' stats, what they're running 40s generally, where they played. And, when you have a good amount of guys, it can take you a split second to try to remember all those things. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot more sales for a smaller guy than it is a bigger guy. Like Baker Mayfield's agent, I'm sure didn't have to ever make a call to say, hey, can you just draft Baker? I mean, we'd love if you would just draft Baker. I'm sure he's getting the calls and he's the one getting everything. So a guy like that, I mean, it's a totally different situation.
Yeah. So what kind of things, like what are the pros and cons of working with like an individual agent versus maybe like a larger agency or like somebody else?
Just in general, the difference between a small and a big, between an individual guy or a smaller firm and a big firm like, all these huge mega firms is really going to be probably going to come down to services. So what are the big agencies can handle more in-house in terms of they can probably handle more of your marketing, handle more of that stuff. There's more money behind it. But, a lot of times these smaller groups they can either handle the same thing themselves or they'll outsource it. They'll find another group who can do it just as well, and just not the group just won't make that profit. The firm won't make that profit. But in the end, whether you're an individual guy, whether it's an individual guy or a big one, they're going to have the same exact leverage in negotiating. They can still have the exact same type of relationships with teams. So, I mean, that's really not a big deal. And also, one of the bigger things we're going with a smaller group versus a big firm is going to be relationships. There are some agents at big firms who do a good job at that, but there are a lot of big firms that just kind of see players as a commodity and don't see them as a relationship. Whereas the smaller guys, the guys that are doing it on their own, you generally find a lot closer relationship between the agent and the player at a smaller firm than at a mega firm. But for me personally, I am very close friends with all my players. We talk almost all the time. We hang out, do all that kind of stuff. So the way that I see myself is different is I'm very, very relational with my guys, which makes it easier for me to fight for them because I see them as my friends. I don't have anyone to the level of where I need to market anyone yet. So I haven't had to deal with that, but I'd probably outsource that eventually if I had to do that. But those are just kind of the general differences of the two.
So if a player was looking to find an agent, how would they go about that process? How would they go about signing an agent? What are the top tips you'd recommend for someone looking to do that?
You know, I have people reach out to me a good amount about looking for agents and that kind of thing. Again, this is going to totally depend on the basis of are they a big player or are they a smaller player? Because if they're a bigger player, there are these things called agent player days where most schools have a thing where agents come in, talk to the players, do all that. The agents come to the player. So that's already set up. That's already established. And that's when you're in school. And then the smaller guys, don't get all that. But then it's kind of a different timing period if you're out of school. So most of the guys that reach out to me are out of school already. Have been out for just finished or just maybe got out a year ago. For those guys, which are, the majority of the time people are reaching out in the first place are guys that are from smaller schools or guys that get overlooked and don't get looked at in college. So for those guys, the best way to do it is, just to a lot of my best players are connections from my other players. So maybe you have a friend that has an agent, maybe he's willing to help, or, maybe there's someone you look up to, you admire, maybe reach out to them and, in reaching out, you have to be very personal. I get emails. I'll respond to every email I get from any player, no matter what. Even if it's to say I can't help you, but I can't represent you, but I can help. I'm willing to help in any way. But I've had emails where guys are just like, it's very, very generic and boilerplate. And I've actually had one where I was one of 20 people in the email. So when you get something like that, the guy's just mass spamming everyone. So if he's not going to take the time to do any research into you, why should you look into him? So, again, that kind of depends on where you are, but most guys that are reaching out for looking for agents are out of school generally. So yeah, that's kind of the two ways I would figure out.
That's funny because we get the same kind of emails from the website, or like some people will just send a link to their YouTube video and that's it. Won't say anything when you put a subject. Will just send me a link to their YouTube video.
And I think nowadays with social media and the era of smartphones, it's so easy to make like a really creative introductory video in addition to highlights. Or it's so easy to come up with creative ways to get your name out there and to have a conversation with someone and to get them interested in you. And for someone to just send a very blanket email where you're one of 20 others, that's like, I'm not even interested in helping you out. I think that's the easiest thing is like, market yourself. Make it so that people want to be on your team.
Yeah.
Any players out there listening?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just put the bare minimum effort. Create a little introduction paragraph in the email. Just do something to set yourself apart. Because, think about it. It's just the same as like applying to a job. These guys are getting a lot of emails from a lot of players. You need to stand out amongst everybody else.
Yeah, no, definitely. And for me, like one of the biggest things for me is, so I'll tell everyone that I talk to this is, I don't care if you're, the next Aaron Rodgers, if our personalities don't mesh, if you're a guy that you're all about yourself, you're all about, what you can make and all that, I don't care to represent that type of guy. I'm looking for a very specific brand of guy and I'm willing to turn down whatever amount of money to get the guys that fit me. I know a lot of agents don't care, but for me, I care about the character of the guys that I represent because I only represent guys with high character.
I think that's important because that also reflects on you as an agent too.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it makes it easier when you're talking to teams too, because hopefully after a while, it's the brand of, hey, anyone associated with Nathan is a high character guy that's never going to get off field issues. We're not going to have to worry about signing a guy mid-season because his guy got, busted for drugs or domestic violence or whatever, so they don't have to worry about that in the back of their heads, which hopefully, helps, with them evaluating a player.
Yeah. That makes your guys all that more appealing. That makes you more appealing to other players because they know you have that reputation with you.
Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned that you work with guys typically who or kind of out of the game for a little bit, or played in college but haven't played for a little bit. Is that right?
Most of mine, I would say most of my guys are guys that played at smaller schools like D2, D3, kind of that level, more D2, but didn't get looked at. Like, have pretty good numbers, pretty good stats, impress people in person, but didn't get noticed in school because they're at a smaller school. Some of those guys can get overlooked. I mean, you got a guy like Christian wasn't getting any attention until I started representing him until he went to the draft, and then, until he went to the combine. And then at the combine, people are like, wow, he can move. And yeah. So those are the guys I represent generally, are the guys who are like that, who just get overlooked. Those are generally the type of guys. Because what you're saying about time, the more you start stepping away from the game, the harder it is to get back in. If you haven't played football where you're recorded and I'd say anywhere over a year, you're kind of in trouble. It's going to be tough. Especially when you start getting over 2-3 years, then it's, teams won't even look. So that's a lot harder to do. Generally, when I have guys reach out that say, hey, I haven't played in 2-3 years, I say, hey, you need to go to spring league, play arena, do something to get some recent film.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the AAF is largely considered a minor league for the NFL. Is it possible for a player to have an entire career in the AAF and kind of be successful, or is success marked by being signed to the NFL?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think so. First of all, I think the goal of the league, I think, people, agents and officials and everyone that's talking is saying the goal is for the NFL to eventually endorse this and make this a part of a thing where it's integrated into their culture, kind of like the NFL Europe was. Only time will tell on that, because I think the NFL is not fully ready to do anything like that, because they don't know what's going to happen financially with this league. And I think that goes into the second part of your question, which is if they can have a long-term career in the league. That's going to depend on if the league is here in 3 years. I mean, we all want to say it is, and we all hope it is, but it all is going to depend on how much revenue they're pulling in, because they're going to have to stay afloat. Because you've seen all these other leagues that pop up, not in recent past, but years and years ago, pop up, do nothing. They go, they lose money and they stop. If we're assuming that the NFL, that the AAF makes money, it's a good that it stays afloat, that people are watching, and it's making money, then that's one conversation. And if that's the case, then I have no problem at all. If I have a guy I'd rather have a guy who has a very, very successful career in the AAF and can do that for 3, 5, however many years, than a guy who's bouncing around from training camp to training camp, practice squad to practice squad in the NFL over and over again. Because it's really demoralizing to players just to go training camp, get cut, come back to training camp, get cut.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if you're in the AAF and you have a successful career, if we're talking these first 3 years, you're making a minimum of $250,000 in 3 years, which, isn't NFL money, but in the terms of real world, I mean, that's a good chunk of money for, getting that over a couple months. So I would have no issue personally for some of my guys doing that. If it works out long term and that's what they want to do, great. But that's going to depend on the individual player and how much of a big deal it is for him to play in the NFL versus how big of a deal it is for him to be playing at a very, very productive level where maybe he's the best at his game, but he's not at the best level. So that's going to be a player-to-player question that they're going to have to answer. And it's going to largely depend on how they do their first year in the AAF. And if the AAF continues after that first year, evaluating, hey, do we want to jump out and go to the NFL, or do we just want to stay in the AAF for another year? What do we want to do? So that's going to be a talk that's going to happen with a lot of players too in between the first and second year of the AAF if it makes it.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad the AAF is allowing players to opt out of their contract to play for the NFL if they get the opportunity. And then obviously they come back. So I'm glad that they have that in there to kind of encourage these guys to play for the AAF while they can and still keep their NFL dreams alive.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I think they went in that Charlie Ebersol and all these people going into this, kind of knew, hey, we need to make this to a place where, we can't compete. We don't want to compete with the NFL. We want to be complimentary. And if we're going to be complimentary, we can't hold guys hostage. Because if we do that, our crowd is going to be so much more limited. And you see that in the CFL happening now too, where it used to be kind of a 2-year, you're stuck in the CFL type thing. And in their new CBA agreements, it's a big push for the 1 year out for the NFL too, to kind of keep up with the AAF. So
yeah,
that AAF structure is having consequences on the CFL also.
Which for me is exciting and earmarks possible success for the AAF, that they are leading the charge and something that the CFL is following with.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. And I think there's definitely some, as much as teams may or may not want to admit it, there is some kind of a rivalry that's kind of brewing of each side thinking that they're the better side for different reasons, and both sides legitimately having good reasons for thinking they're the better side. So, it's interesting, and both sides are going to kind of have to play off each other. And if the AAF sticks around long term, it'll be interesting to see kind of that dynamic, that rivalry, and how both have to kind of do stuff to keep up with each other. Because that would be pure competition right there between those two.
Yeah. Well, do you think that there's an advantage to any one league? Just thinking, we got the AAF starting this February. CFL has been going on for years. We got the XFL starting in 2020. Not to mention, there's quite a few semi-professional and arena leagues. Is there any advantage to the AAF over any of these other leagues?
Yeah. So what I like when I'm talking to my guys, it's very specific for each guy. For example, if you are a 300, upper 290s, 300-pound defensive lineman, it's going to be tough for you to play in the CFL because it's a very, very fast game. You have to be very, very fast in shape, and they generally don't they generally don't go with bigger linemen. So if you have a bigger lineman, the AAF is going to be a better fit. If you are a smaller, rangier linebacker, you're going to fit better in the CFL than the AAF. So it's going to be interesting. I think the AAF is going to kind of develop more like a pro style league, kind of like the NFL, how the NFL plays. So you'll kind of have similar format to that, whereas the CFL is very speed based, not very run heavy. So running backs would probably, might do better in this league because, might be a little more balanced than in the CFL where you have 3 downs, so you have to pass. So it just depends for me, it depends on the player. But what I like about the AAF is the connections to the NFL. All the players and GMs and coaches that kind of have that NFL backing, because networking, like you said earlier, networking is huge. And if you have Steve Spurrier, Michael Vick, one of these guys in your corner pushing you to the NFL, that's going to make a big difference. So, and you're playing the same style of game. Let's be honest. If the NFL is looking for guys to play their type of game, they're going to have to find the guys. They can't just take any guy from the CFL because their guys are going to be undersized in some positions, not all positions, but in some. So when they're looking, they're going to look at it's a lot easier if you're playing the same style of game, whereas the CFL is just a little bit different of a style. So that's kind of probably the benefits the AAF has going forward, is the same style and the NFL connections.
That makes a lot of sense. I watch a lot of these highlight reels of the guys that play at arena football, and it's almost a completely different sport. Yeah. Arena's a whole nother beast. It's very different too. And even the CFL, I was talking to a CFL scout yesterday, and I was showing him an arena guy's film, and he said, it's just so hard to evaluate arena film. We just don't even know what to do. Yeah. It's just such a different game. So even CFL teams don't. It's more similar to the CFL than the NFL, but CFL teams don't even know what to do with it all the time. Mm-hmm. So okay. So when is a newly eligible player allowed to sign with an agent?
This is all based on NCAA rules and how that operates. And basically the short answer is after their last game of the season. So if a team does not go to a bowl game, it would be after their last regular season game. If they go to a bowl game, it would be after that bowl game. But so kind of how that works is, again, the agents depending on the school's compliance department, athletic compliance department. Some schools are very, very good about letting agents come in and talk to the players all the time. Some are very, very strict where they only want you talking to the players when they're there. So you can only see them like twice a year. It really depends on the school's compliance department of how much you're able to kind of actively recruit them. But they're not, due to NCAA rules, they're not allowed to sign anything until after the last game they play. And that's kind of the hard rule on that.
Okay.
It's interesting though, because the AAF season is totally different from NFL. So let's say like you're in
Correct.
college and you get signed in the NFL. Well, you would just start, preseason or practice or whatever after school gets out. But with the AAF, would that be different because the season's different? So let's say your last game's in December, but you don't graduate till May. Would you start playing in February or would you wait until you graduate? See what I mean? Like it's a little different with the AAF season being off.
Yeah, it is very different. And I mean, I've been thinking through this myself a lot of how that's going to work. I think we're not going to see this kind of issue as much in the first year because teams are already really, really full. So I don't think that they're going to want newer players as much. I don't see as big of a push for that. If there was going to be a big push for that, people would save roster spots, and I'm not really seeing that. So I don't think that's going to be as huge of a factor in the first year. But I'm going to be very curious if that goes in the second year, how that's going to work, because like I'm talking to a guy right now who's at a small NAIA school, and he's doing great there, but he's probably, he's to the point where he knows he's at a small school. So if the CFL comes and they say, hey, we want you, he's going to be in that same situation too. So, I mean, it's an interesting type deal of, you have to kind of think through, like, there's multiple things. First, if you go to something like the AAF or the CFL, you're kind of saying, I don't think I'm going to be in the draft. I don't think I'm going to be taken. So you're kind of foregoing your first opportunity to get in the NFL. Then if you do that, if you go straight to the AAF, you're foregoing your spring, your entire spring semester of college. So right when you're going to graduate, I mean, that might be why the AAF is putting in scholarship, maybe. Some of the scholarship funds, maybe they're thinking ahead of, hey, some guys are going to leave, so we're going to let them go back to school after they're done to finish that last semester or whatever. So that could have been a thought. I don't think they've publicly acknowledged that, but I mean, that would make sense. If they put in that scholarship to say, hey, we know we're going to make guys leave early, so we'll reimburse them by paying for their school when they want to go back. It's a possibility. But it's a very interesting question. I just don't think we're going to see the answer to that until year 2.
Makes sense.
And another question about timing is, when it comes to the XFL, do you think that McMahon and the XFL is offering enough in their contracts and salaries for anyone to sit out with the AAF and wait for the XFL?
There's right now, I mean, a lot of guys that are trying to play are just desperate to play. They just want to play at the first available opportunity. I mean, all my guys basically say, hey, Nathan, I just get me back on a field as soon as I can. Like, I just need to be on a field. So to wait a year is just really, really tough. We were in a situation where I had a guy in the CFL a guy that signed with the AAF who had CFL interest, and some CFL teams basically said, hey, if you kind of wait a little bit, we might be interested later on in this guy, but we just don't have an answer for you now. But we went ahead and got him signed in the AAF just because it's the security, it's the you're going to get a chance. Whereas same thing with the XFL, you're going to have to wait. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think I'm a big fan of the more leagues the better. If we can get guys off the couch playing, that is all good with me. Like, I am great with that. So, I have no problem with guys going to play in the XFL, but if you're going to go like a year or two without film, again, we'll come back to the film. If you're going at 2 years, like a year or two without film, that's a dangerous deal. The only reason I would feel comfortable with that is if a guy had a contract. Like if a guy signs a contract, saying he has a for sure spot in the XFL, blah, 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 I'd feel comfortable with him signing that. But if he's waiting and he doesn't know if he's going to get in and he's, losing a year of where he could get film, I wouldn't be okay with that. So, I mean, I'm a proponent of getting a guy on a field as soon as possible. That's kind of how I am. And I don't think the XFL needs, I mean, there's always a huge turnover of players, because there's going to be so many players coming out next year after this season. So I don't think they're going to have a problem in getting guys. And I don't think guys are going to wait around for that personally.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lack of talent. I think it was Charlie who did an interview saying there's something like 15,000 players coming out of college football to fill what was like 2,000 roster spots in the NFL. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's plenty of guys out there.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, there's tons of guys, and I mean, all those guys that got cut in training camps are sitting at home right now, or after training camp got cut, and a lot of those guys are sitting at home right now. So yeah, I'm if a guy has an offer, I'm never going to turn down an offer to say wait. When a guy's an offer, he needs to depending on what level of guy he is. Like, is he a D1 stud, or is he a D2 guy who's looking for a shot? And if it's a guy looking for a shot, like, you're never going to turn down an opportunity to play.
Right. Do you know if there's any kind of salary cap figure for the AAF, or is there any kind of future where that would have one?
So right now it's a base contract for every player. And then there's going to be incentives built in, which we don't know what those incentives are going to be. My guess is they're going to be set by the league for each team. It's going to be something to do with, I don't know if it's going to be like team bonuses only, or if they're going to do individual stats, like if you hit X amount of touchdowns, you get X amount of money, or if you hit X amount of rushing yards, or blah, blah, or if they're just going to say, hey, if you're the passing leader, rushing leader, tackles leader. I don't know how they're going to structure that, if they're going to go that in depth, or if they're just going to go on a win-loss type base. But for the next 3 years, it's going to be base, like a base salary plus incentives. So with that, there's no need for a salary cap because everyone's going to get the same amount. The question would be, after year 3, do they continue with that model, or do they throw in, the same type deal, or do they go to pure salary cap? And I think the question with that, the answer to that's going to be, how well does it do? If it's booming, making tons of money, and they're getting way more money than they thought they're going to get in, I think it'd be very, very easy for them to go to that model. But if they're worried about keeping costs predictable, then they'd probably want to stay with that predictable model. But I think it's going to be based off of, for now, there's no salary cap, but it's going to be based off in the future, based off how they do these next couple of years, year 2, 3, whatever it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So did you see what happened to Earl Thomas yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were curious what kind of guarantees there's going to be in AAF player contracts to make sure that something that happened to Earl Thomas doesn't happen to AAF players where they're injured, and now who knows what's in his future.
The AAF contract does not guarantee. It's the same as the NFL. It does not guarantee any money. And this is a big issue with football in general. And what I'm really hoping is that some players that the NFL is going to have the control over this. The players are, and I'm really hoping that in 2020, when the CBA runs out, that the NFL players are actually show some teeth and actually back it up. And I think they need to do something radical to put a message across of we need guaranteed money in some sort. I don't even think it needs to be 100%, but I mean, the fact that it's the roughest sport in all of sports, the most physical, long-term damages to your body, the least amount of playing time you can play because of how much of a toll it puts on your body, and it's the only sport that's not guaranteed. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So the players it's all in the players' hands in 2020 of what if they can set that example, and I think that'll trickle down, like we were talking about earlier with the CFL and the AAF. I think here, if in 2020, if you see NFL players locking out and striking and not playing unless they get guaranteed money, I think you're going to see that trickle down to all these other levels. And I'm really hoping that happens, because the players are going to have the control to do it. It's just going to be, will the players union and will the players really stand up, or are they just going to cower down again and just give in to the owners? So, I mean, I think that's going to be the question.
I really hope, as a fan, that the players do hold out for what they need, because I would love to see these players protected for as long as possible. I mean, I think that as a society, we're really coming around to the importance of safety and putting concerns like that first. And I think it's going to be more important for the NFL to kind of catch up with that. And even more, like, we don't have to get into this, but political aspects of as well. I feel like the NFL is full of a bunch of people that are in the past, and I think that's cost them. So I think it's going to be important for the NFL to put safety and other things like that first.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, there's a lot more factors into it. I mean, we make it very simple of like, hey, why did you pay more money? I mean, I know there's a lot of money concerns and all of that, but the players are going to have the control over that, and it's just going to be up to what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to do. So it's going to be interesting to see. I actually wrote an article for the SMU law school a little bit ago. I can send you a link to this, but I wrote on the XFL before I knew about the AAF. I wrote about the XFL and how they can change the dynamics of guaranteed contracts. Kind of wrote about that when the XFL was releasing their intent to play. So I talked about that a little bit ago, just talking about how, why do we even call the NFL contracts a contract? Because, a contract is an intent to be bound to an agreement, and teams don't intend to be bound to anything. They know at any time they can just cut the guy. So why are we calling it a contract when it's really an at-will employment?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, send us that link. We'll put it in the show notes. That way people can have a look and see. One of the questions I get most often is, if there's going to be team tryouts?
So the team tryouts were those combines. And those combines were what they went off of for tryouts. That was their deal. They filled up extremely fast. People were still not sure, didn't know they were going to fill up. So actually, I probably had 2 or 3 guys that were going to go to those that probably would have gotten, that would have shown out enough to get drafted, but they didn't go. And so, because we didn't get it in time. And so, a lot of guys are in that same boat of, hey, I just missed that tryout. And so, unfortunately, from everything I'm seeing, those are the tryouts. And so it's done. There's nothing now. And if you're a guy that's an unallocated guy from a small school and you just want a shot, like, unfortunately, you kind of missed your best shot, which was that draft, those combines and that draft. And now it's extremely uphill, unfortunately, at this point for those top guys.
So the best thing for them to do would be to play anywhere and get some film and just kind of stay in shape.
Yeah, if you keep plugging away, keep talking to teams, make sure that people know your name, try to get some feedback from teams. And if you're not getting any of that, then do something. You can't sit out. If you sit out more than 1 year and you've gone 2 years without film, you're in trouble. So if you just got out of school and you were waiting a year to see if anything's going to happen, that's fine. But after a full year is gone, you need to do something. Do arena, go to the spring league, do something, because you got to get recent film on you of you playing, because that's going to be important. And I don't know if they're going to do another wave of traps next year, but if so, you want to come in with not just what you did in person, but also recent film to show that you're in playing shape and what you can do in a professional type deal.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Do you know if and when there will be a preseason for AAF? I mean, we're just so excited and we want this to happen now.
Yeah. Yeah. So training camp is going to start January 4th in San Antonio. I'm assuming that's going to go through February or through the beginning of February. And I'm guessing kind of the beginning of February would be preseason. If I had to guess, I would highly doubt that they would just go blind into the season. I mean, without seeing guys in a live game, without any film to go back and watch them of in full contact. I mean, week 1 would be interesting. We'll just put it that way. It's a preseason.
Yeah, and thinking about it, I mean, they're all the teams are going to be in San Antonio, so I mean, it'd be easy to kind of throw together a few exhibition games, kind of mimic a preseason.
They got to do something. I mean, they're going to do something to some extent. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to do something, because there's no way you go into week 1 without any game experience, any game practice, without seeing your guys in live speed. Because I mean, when you're playing your own guys, you're not going to go full speed. I mean, you're not going to light up a guy that's on your own team in the practice. So it's just different.
They would be easy to market too, because that's right at postseason for NFL.
Yeah.
So and you get a week or 2 between the last game and the Super Bowl, which any preseason AAF games would land right in that spot. Mm-hmm. So you get just the same amount of hype and love for football directed right at the AAF, especially if they can get it on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that would make sense. I don't know how far out the TV contracts have to be for that type of thing. So how that would work, but it would. I mean, if there's not, I mean, I think
It'd be competing with the Pro Bowl.
when is the Pro Bowl?
I want to say it's the week before the Super
Yeah, that's what I was
Bowl.
thinking about.
Yeah.
And then
I think it is too. I think it's that bye week.
But a lot of people, I mean, the ratings went down on that one. A lot of people are kind of not not excited about the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, like I love football, but I will never watch that dumb game.
Yeah, it's not as big of a highly big of a deal. I mean, it's great if you're a player because I mean, you get that on your resume and you get an extra, bonus, some bonus money and a free trip, but yeah. I mean, you look at all the All-Star games. I mean, they're all kind of a joke through any sport. I mean, baseball used to matter because you used to get home field advantage, but that's gone.
Yeah, and it's like, especially with football, it's such a team sport. It's like, how well can you play with guys that you've never played with or typically play against?
Yeah, you're supposed to be rivals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, awesome, Nathan. This was a lot of fun, a lot of great information. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. If people want to connect with you online, where can they go?
So Twitter is probably one of the easiest ways because I am on Twitter. You can direct message me pretty easily on there at Nathan, Nathan Shack 19. So that is my Twitter. That has a link to my LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Sounds good. And before you get bombarded with this question, are you looking for new players?
I'm always looking. So it depends, right? With how big I am right now, it depends on, is this it depends on the level of the guy. Like, if we're talking a guy who's going to take a lot of work, I may not be able to do that. But a guy that has NFL experience, CFL experience, had a workout for the NFL or got cut, those type of guys, I'd be glad to help because they're a little bit better name known. But I do have a partner who's also willing to take on some guys. So
as long as they're good character, right?
Yes.
No.
I mean, especially for me, the type of guy, so like my faith is extremely important to me as a Christian guy. And so the guys I really look for, I love helping Christian guys, guys that have my same faith they're trying to use football to kind of give back and to kind of promote their faith. That's something that I really go for. So even if I can't represent a guy, I'll do whatever I can to help him, whether that's, giving him email addresses or telling him his best options, kind of walking through the steps like I did today of like, hey, go arena, go this. Like, I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to help a guy. And I mean, I'm willing to help whoever reaches out to me and has, kind of that good character, especially Christian guys too.
Sounds good. Well, once again, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was great having you. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
So that was Nathan.
I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as we did. It was so much fun to talk to him. And there was so much that, like I said, he has insight on. There's so much that he's thought about when it comes to the season and drafting players and education and how a season's going to play out in ways that I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, definitely. And as somebody who's like been in the industry or been in football for a while, who can see kind of the behind the scenes things, kind of predict like what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Like I didn't even think about college kids skipping their final semester to join an Alliance team.
Right. Or the consequences of not having a preseason. I hadn't even thought about how ridiculous that could be.
Yeah.
But something that we mentioned in the interview, make sure when you guys, to any players out there, when you communicate to potential agents, like you need to sell yourself, be on your P's and Q's and really present yourself in the best way as opposed to just like, yo, I need an agent.
Yeah. Anybody can just throw out their highlight reel or just throw out like a few stats, but like you got to do a little bit more. And like I was just thinking, I used to be like a hiring manager at a company and you get so many applications for like one position or just a couple positions that you're looking for reasons to immediately get rid of resumes. So whenever you get like 30, it's like, all right, well, I need to cut out half of these. Well, this guy has poor grammar, this person, and I'm looking for reasons just to get rid of some so I can actually have, just a few to actually review. And so you need to make sure that you do the utmost to put yourself in the best light. So whenever they're just trying to like filter through guys, you stand out.
Absolutely. And I think that's more That's important to just everyone looking for a job anyway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is life advice.
Right.
If you're selling yourself for anything, stand above and beyond.
This has now turned into a life coaching podcast. We will now begin charging you $200 an hour.
And Nathan said that he'd be willing to come back on the show. So if you guys have any more questions that you want him to answer, or if you just want to have some ideas for him to kind of bounce around, let us know. We'll have him back on the show.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to him again.
Yeah, definitely. That's all we got for you guys this week.
So I think it was last week we said that we would be bringing you guys with the name.
Did we say that?
I thought so.
Okay.
So we didn't want to leave you guys hanging. We've been thinking about a name.
We have decided on a name.
But
we're going to let you know next week.
Ah! We said it at the same time. That was totally not planned.
And also, don't forget, we do have the giveaway going on. We do have a few entries, so if you haven't entered yet, be sure to do that. Simply take a screenshot of our show subscribed on your phone, or grab your friend's phone, take a picture of your phone showing it was subscribed, and then subscribe on your friend's phone as well.
Yeah.
And until next week.
Bye.
How much are we going to beat this horse?
We're going to beat it till it's dead.